Indian solutions to transform India is what we're going to discuss with a very eminent panel here. Mr. Kamar, Mr. Wwatch, Mr. Sudarshan, and of course, Chavi Rajawa. Thanks each one of you for being here. Let me first begin by talking about the solutions to transform. India is a very, very diverse country. It has diverse ideas about growth, about development, and very diverse interests as well. Is a common vision possible across political parties, across business and industry, across business and civil society?
I think a common vision is definitely possible. One of the most important things which we are seeing in hinterland India is, which I was just discussing with Chavi, is capacity building. Now, we are talking of capacity building at the panchayat level, at the block level, and at the district level. Here, there can be partnership with the private sector in training them. Government itself can play a role, but I think a bigger role can be played by the private sector training the block level. You may have a very good sarpanch, as we have with Chavi. Right. She understands that she's got a vision, she's got all her 10 fingers inside. But she's to operate at a block level. And unless you are going to have a block level which does the sanctioning, which does that, the district level is there. But the most important aspect of that is the block level, where there's no capacity, they don't know. And by the time they learn the ropes, their 5 years are over. And not only 5 years are over, they have learned the ropes. There's reservation of women, there's reservation by caste. Now I'm talking very clearly in the context of my own state. And suddenly he finds that his constituency, which he had as an elected block member, has been taken over, has been either become for women, the woman finds it become male, and somebody finds a general seat becomes reserved, or a reserved seat becomes general. So they are on the wayside. Similarly, capacity building, we are talking about building these 100 cities. It's all very well. What is the level of expertise at our municipal level? I'm talking about capacity building in government, capacity building with ministers, with secretaries, with joint secretaries. How many ministers of any government of any party really have the competence to deal? They are electable, but are they capable? And if they are capable, they are not electable. So you have this great dichotomy between incapacity in India.
How do you bridge this gap between capacity building on one hand and what private sector can do at every level of governance? We've spoken about the block level, the sarpanch level, all of those levels. What kind of a role can corporate India play in that?
Well, I agree with what Kumar said on one thing, but I'll start with a little lighter note by disagreeing with him when he says competent or capable people don't get elected. Maybe. But he said...
Generally.
Everything is generally. There's no 100 and 0 in the life, Kamar. But he said also capable people don't get elected very often. Maybe generally. How did he get elected?
That's a compliment. It's a disguised compliment. Take it
That's the first point.
And not only got elected for 34 years.
I mean,
I wanted to rub that in.
Voters,
that was meant for Rahul.
Voters do make mistakes, but that's fine. But but where I agree with him is that whether it's a civil society and represented by two outstanding people here, or business, corporates, and the government, of course they can get along. There are problems and this and that. But I think what I noticed as a citizen, as a corporate, and as a member of the upper house of parliament, rather than the disagreements between the civil society and the corporates, which are there, we misunderstand each other and things like that, and both the politicians and industrialists have to improve all over the world. We have a bad reputation. We are crooks. Let's face it, that's what the general view is. But that apart, I think the problem I found the most disturbing, and that's not in this program of this session, is political parties agreeing with each other or not.
Yes.
Tremendous opportunistic opposition.
That's right. You have raised a very important point. I'm going to come to the two of you in just a bit, but political opposition. And one is tempted to believe that this is actually just political rhetoric. What they opposed while they were in opposition is what they're supporting while they're in government. What you have been supporting in government is perhaps we given to understand you will oppose in parliament.
Insurance is one example.
Exactly. So is opposition merely political rhetoric after all?
They are now proposing what they are opposing what they had opposed for so many years. They are now proposing. Take the Land Acquisition Act, which he said. They didn't move a single amendment. In fact, as the Parliamentary Affairs Minister, when I brought this onto the floor of the House, I asked them, if there's some amendments, I'll take care of it. Do you have any ideas? Not a single amendment was moved by them. And now, suddenly, suddenly they want to correct it. If the BJP government of today wants to talk about process, we are happy. Because we don't want a process which doesn't fly. There's no land acquisition. We are trying to benefit somebody by land acquisition.
Right.
But if there's no land acquisition, how will you benefit them? Now, the last 5 years of Parliament saw not opposition, but obstruction. There's a difference. You are breaking down the parliamentary system. You are breaking down on the most important edifice of democracy by, you oppose, stand up, vote against it. But it led to opposition. There was nothing known as opposition to a thing. You obstruct it. Now, we are good learners. We learn from them. Right?
All right. So the political opposition will continue because it's political rhetoric.
Okay, so we've learned from them. We are going to play back the same thing.
When we started off this discussion as far as partnerships are concerned, how there is this, there is a lack of partnerships, at least at the absolute block level, at the panchayat level. What has been your experience? What kind of transformative partnerships can really happen between India Inc. And say, the governance at the absolutely local level?
I think we've got a huge opportunity. The only question is, are people willing to come forward? While we may not have a physical divide, but we all know there is an invisible divide between what we call Bharat, that's the rural India, as well as India, which is the urban India, right? So what can we do to break that divide and treat this as one holistic nation? And I think we can only do that if we create those partnerships. The tragedy is that given the cynicism that exists, I think it's because of that people are not willing to take that step forward. They think it's a high risk. They think there's no return on investment if they enter the rural sector, which I don't think is true. Yes, maybe the ROI may take longer, but it is there because people in villages are willing to pay provided they benefit from it. Right. So far, whenever people have entered the rural sector, and I can speak for my area, there are certain states which have done well. There have been certain partnerships which have been formed, but I think we still have a long way to go. What usually I've seen happens is that the villages are not ever taken as the key stakeholders. Nobody has a dialogue with them. Nobody does a need analysis. And until you don't do that, you will always fall short if you would continue to have a top-down approach. And as Mr. Nath said, even as far as the government is concerned, and going back to what Mr. Jaitley said earlier today, it seems like a daunting task given the scale, but I think that is exactly where the opportunity lies. Right. And while the government has the intent, where I think it lacks is the fact that they're not very good at management, and that is where private sector can come in and help assist. We probably need specialists to come in with focus areas to help execute and monitor the different schemes, the different sectors. Right. Currently, we don't have that. So people, even within the government, are lost, be it at the district level or the block level. On top of that, I think where we fail is the fact that our system is not held accountable. Again, going back to what Mr. Jaitley said earlier this morning, that to evaluate government officials and the delivery system is a daunting task. I do not think so. What we need is partnerships to bring in technology which is user-friendly and ensure that we have both positive as well as negative motivation. So if there is a budget allocated to a district, now you need to find a methodology to ensure that the funds are dispersed. Our biggest issue is the funds reach the district headquarters, but they do not go anywhere beyond that. There's no question asked. So if we can ensure that the government officials set turnaround time or time frames, so when a panchayat, for example, proposes certain projects for the village, so from the time that it reaches the district, set a time frame within which the administrative sanction, the technical sanction, and the financial sanction happens. Usually what I've seen is a year goes by, the administrative and technical sanctions have happened within a span of 15 days to a month. Right. The financial sanction comes in only after a year. So we've lost out, if we're looking for water, we've lost out on an entire year of monsoon.
I will come back to you for a reaction on that and why there is this lack of enthusiasm even on part of India. But let me first ask you, we began this whole thing by, can there be a common vision between political parties, across political parties, business and civil society? From where you see things, the question is, do you believe a common vision of India is possible between civil society, India Inc. and policymakers?
Yeah. Yes, definitely yes. One is decentralized governance is an issue which we are discussing. I think bad governance both in public and private sector. This is, I have watched experience. I was a vigilance director in Lokayukta looking at corruption in health services. Seen corruption both in the private and the public sector. So good governance is the issue, and decentralized good governance, if we can do it. We have one of the good Panchayat Raj systems in Karnataka, but again corruption has percolated down. So today, whether from BOFERS to coal scams where prime ministers are involved to Gram Panchayat Sarpanch level, it's ubiquitous. I think good governance is an important issue. Second issue is, I think there we all have the same vision. I think we all agree on that, but there should be equal commitment to bring in good governance by politicians, the business, ethical business, and others, which the other partners also have to join hands. Second is the inclusive growth. We are all emphasizing the inclusive growth. We want, example in health, we have PET scans, MRIs in major cities, but in the villages today where I work, a simple microscopic facility you can diagnose leprosy, tuberculosis, malaria. We don't have that. So this is a dichotomy. We can do heart transplants, all organ transplants, but people are dying of simple hookworm anemia with 2 grams hemoglobin. We have not been able to solve the problem of anemia in this country. 60% of the pregnant mothers are anemic. So these are challenges. We need innovations. We need innovations, but what type of innovations? The greatest breakthrough innovation in healthcare is the intraocular lenses. When I was a medical student, we used to import intraocular lenses. Today, it's a business model where we manufacture in India intraocular lenses for 100 rupees, which I buy and use it. And our healthcare costs have come down. So appropriate technology, businesses which will also help, which will also empower for the inclusive growth is also very important. Not only the high tech, not only the growth is important, but it has to be inclusive growth, and it has to happen. And environmental sustainability is also very, very important.
Mr. Nath, if I may come to you, the last few years of the UPA did see the civil society and government on two sides of the spectrum. Given the recent examples in the past, do you believe the civil society has been a little obstructionist as far as development is concerned?
You can't brush all civil society. There are examples of civil society doing excellent work. In fact, many times we look for civil society. Individually, personally, I look for civil society to come to my own district and participate. So there is, just brushing it saying that all civil society is confrontationist, but there are also cases of civil society which has been obstructionist. Take environment, you haven't come to it.
Right.
But there have been cases where civil society has been used combatively between one company versus another company that block this. So they'll go and will go to one of the judicial bodies and file a PIL and blocks it. Then suddenly there's a settlement. I know of at least 3 cases where civil society has filed complaints, filed PILs, and suddenly there's a settlement, something is exchanged, and the matter is settled. Now that is not civil society, that is business. So you have good and bad civil society. You have some very excellent work of civil society. I think India should be proud of its civil society, what is done. But civil society also, there's never been a question asked when we talk of delivery. And civil society hasn't delivered. Nobody asked that you spent 10 crores and nothing was delivered. What is there to show for it? Where if it happens in the private sector, you spend 10 crores or in the government, you are accountable. There'll be the CAG, there'll be an audit, there'll be officers, you'll be chased. But civil society, there's nobody to ask a question.
You want to come in on that? A very vibrant civil society, you can choose to protect the environment, but you cannot be an environmental hawk. And that's the view that also comes from policymakers India Inc.?
I agree that there are good politicians, good business people, good civil society. There are also corrupt civil society, corrupt government and corrupt business. So all good people, we can join together and have a common vision. But what we can't, there will be some differences. Because I am biased against the poor for inclusive growth. The same business people may not feel that. For them, the growth itself is important. Inclusive growth may not be. I understand. So let us have dialogue. It's a dialectical process. We should not oppose at all. Little bit of healthy criticism is needed so that we come to some synthesis. So it's a dialectical process. Don't look at it as obstructionism, but look at it positively. These people have some point. They have some concern for the poor and the inclusive growth. So we should be looked at that type rather than calling it as obstructionism. I think coming back to environmentalism, I totally agree. But there are models. I work in a tiger sanctuary. It was a wildlife sanctuary. Now it's a tiger sanctuary. We have clearly shown a model where ecotourism, the people's development, the hardcore environmentalists would say we should displace them from out of because it's a Project Tiger. But we have shown that the 10,000 Soliga tribal people living within the sanctuary, their development and livelihood of those tribal people and the conservation can go together. So development can happen of the people without eroding. So equal concern for the conservation and at the same time development of the people. Tourism also can come there, but tourism has to be managed. Community-based tourism is more important than somebody else coming there. So we have a community-based tourism, community-based development, and that's the type of inclusive growth we need to have models.
Fair point indeed. Chavi here raised a point about inclusive growth. It has been repeated again by Mr. Sudarshan. If I may come to you, Mr. Bajaj. Inclusive growth is a very good concept. Every politician likes to talk about that. India Inc. Keeps repeating that. But a lot of people here in this room from different sectors of life will perhaps say that there hasn't been enough walk the talk on inclusive growth. Like she said here, the perception is that there isn't such great return on investment in rural India. Why invest there? Why invest with the last mile? How would you defend corporate India's position on this?
Forget the guy who wants to make quick money in industry. There are those, they will be there. But no, I would say it's not really sensible. A selfish businessman would genuinely not work for inclusive growth. I mean, sorry to use a bad language, who the hell will buy my motorcycles if he remains poor? I mean, you have to grow to create purchasing power. It's the elementary principle of economics. So you want to be efficient, input-output ratio has to be positive. You don't dig a well and fill it up. You have to create asset. It's not easy. If you have to provide millions who get 200 rupees a day, only the real garib will come there. We businessmen feel many of us, to reduce poverty, I think elimination will take time, you have to provide employment.
That's right.
Don't give good dole, provide employment. Till you can provide employment, you have to give some assistance. That's correct. And for providing employment, other things being equal, you need growth. Growth in the right sense of the term.
Chavi, I want you to come on that because Mr. Bajaj makes a very important point here. It's in his own selfish interest to go out there and do inclusive growth because he has to have more buyers for products that they make. How do you see this?
Sure,
you buy that argument?
Pardon me?
You buy that argument?
Well, if I were a business person, I probably would. Because sometimes I often feel, because I've been at various forums with industrialists, and it's just really unfortunate to see how people don't have the vision that you are speaking of at the moment. They think it is somebody else's job. But if this is our country, if it is our globe, I think it is as much my responsibility as yours or anyone else's. So I think that is something that we need to learn to come up with a common vision for. So that's my point I'd like to make. But in terms of, and I'd also like to add over here, which going back to speaking of decentralization, inclusive growth, etc., and reaching the last mile. Now growth, I've again been on various academic sessions where I often feel that people only think that industrialization, urbanization is the only way forward. But which means we are forgetting that there is the agrarian economy which needs a greater focus. Now if we're going to just industrialize, and I'm not against industrialization, but I'm against the lack of focus that 70% of rural India, or rather 70% of the Indian population requires, and I think that is being omitted. And therefore I think that needs to be looked into, and when the private sector is coming in or the government is working towards growth, that segment has to be given the required focus, because unless until we do not, we're not going to have a balanced growth. And that would be my input. Coming back to decentralization, I think that there's a huge role that the government needs to play. The private sector can also, as I said earlier, play a huge part. And when we speak of the rural sector, the last mile, coming back to the 73rd, 74th Amendment, great attempt, great intent, but has it really reached the grassroots? It has not.
Mr. Bajaj, you agree that people like Chavi and Mr. Sudarshan here should be your channels to tap those markets, to tap development-oriented projects that you want to launch for there? Is that a pragmatic solution?
Prime, what I would agree. If you had said solely, I may not necessarily agree. You know, for a corporate, say like mine,
right,
it's much easier to give money than to do the good work yourself.
That's right.
And what's happened this year, at least some groups may be different. From our group, we used to spend, because of the accumulation of funds, most of or all our philanthropic expenditure was through our public charitable trusts. So it's 60, 70 crores a year, to mention the figure. Now, from 1st April 2014, while that continues, we have, it's not, I won't go into detail, it's not technically mandatory, but we have to spend 2%, any good company, 3,000 companies like that who are covered, we have to spend 2% of our average 3 years profit on CSR. For this purpose, I take CSR and philanthropy as the same. There are books written on CSR. It's not the same as philanthropy. But my reading is my government, this government and this government considers that similar to philanthropy. Now, say if I have to spend 100 crores per year on that from our company. So I would spend a total of 170 crores. There is no way I can spend it myself.
Yeah.
I can't. Somebody else may. Tata may be the only exception, but even they donate a lot. So I have to, this year itself, I don't know whether I reach 170 crores. Please don't ask me.
No, forget, look at Chhindwara.
No, look at Kamal Nath.
That's a very open pitch being made there.
Now, if Rahul, you said you're doing this, you're going to have 170 crores of CSR, it's not spending the money. The private sector knows how to spend money efficiently. Now, that is a skill. If you were to partner with, say, few panchayats, in the kind of problems they have, you got people, you got a management team, you got qualified people who can go and assist. It is this kind of partnership. That why the hell isn't it happening? The chief of the block panchayat, the BDO, the chief of the block panchayat at the Janpad level, at the block level, will sit on something for 6 months. But if he sees somebody from Rahul Bajaj's company is monitoring this, and he knows these people will come and they've got access even to go to the state capital and to move, he will make sure he's doing.
Kamal Nath, when he was a minister for various things.
Yeah. And he will automatically see. So I think one of the great partnerships which can take place today, again, even in training the sarpanches. Everybody is not a chabi.
I think this CSR is a wonderful concept and we can partner with the good businesses and do it, but there are limitations. I have a personal experience, a distillery plant polluting the groundwater, the rural people there, the drinking water is also spoiled, but they want to do CSR in those villages. They approached us whether we can take up. I mean, that type of hypocrisy of a tobacco company or an alcohol company or the junk food manufacturers, they might be prosperous, but my heart breaks when I see tribals, when they have no nutritious food, but they get enamored by drinking beverages or the junk food, where they need is good nutrition or essential drugs. I don't have anti-snake venom serum, but unwanted medicines, irrational medicines, the so-called tonic bottles and all these rackets which are based on advertisement, which are not essential, they are being promoted. So that's where I think a responsible business, we need to make, growth should be there, but with a responsible business, some amount of concern for, they are very good in advertisement and the beverages, I don't want to name them, but right, they can reach out, but milk doesn't reach those poor people, and the need for drinking milk is more important than a beverage is very important.
Fair point indeed. I'm afraid we'll have to take this offline. Completely run out of time here. in this session. Thank you very much for being a wonderful audience. I think the consensus is simple. India is a very diverse country with diverse ideas, but there is, after all, one vision, and that is for India to only progress. Thanks very much, each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.